If you somehow don't already know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is back on Netflix, and it is everywhere. As my entire generation rewatches, the praise is storming social media, and it's 100% deserved. One aspect that is generally respected in the series is how well it shows change and maturity with some of our main characters, most notably in Zuko. But many also point out the amount of growth we see in Aang, and the extent to which the tone of the show matches his maturity as it goes on. I was definitely one to preach how well the show builds over time, and I was not disappointed at all upon my recent viewing. However, I did pick up on something that I didn't really consider while watching the show growing up. Aang doesn't actually change that much. Like, at all. Don't get me wrong, he has definitely grown by the end of the show, but he's still the same lighthearted, gentle soul as when it started. In fact, he is actively aversive to change, and is holding on to the lost ways of his people. Watching the show with this idea in mind made me realize how many major plot points are direct examples of the world testing his values as an air nomad. This video is about what I think Aang actually represents, and his resistance to change. Before all 5 people watching this jump at me or turn off the video, hear me out. This show has some of the best character arcs out there. I would never argue that. I can't think of anyone on TV that represents inner conflict as well as everybody's favorite prince. Combine that with Katara's overtime growth of power and confidence, and Sokka's growth of leadership skills and humility, and you have some fantastic character development. But all 3 characters' initial flaws and struggles, to varying degrees, come from the 100-Year War. Sokka's standoffish attitude and his superiority complex stemmed from being made the man of his village at such a young age. After losing their mother, as well as every other waterbender in the village, Katara took on the role of a parent and grew clearly frustrated that she never got the opportunity to harness her abilities and reach her full potential. The war's effect on Zuko are pretty apparent without analysis. His problems are written all over his face. Okay, that was a low blow. Sorry, Zuzu. But Aang is different. He missed this entire life-changing experience and came out of the iceberg completely innocent, the only person in the entire world mentally untouched by the war, at least at first. Over the course of the show, he loses this ignorance. The new world proves itself darker and darker through the form of imperialism, misdirected vengeance, corrupt governments, and repressed youth given biased educations. Even finding all this adversity, Team Avatar traveled the world, freeing prisoners of war and settling conflicts. And in these times, Aang brought hope. The same hope that allowed Sokka, Katara, and Zuko to take to the positive changes upon them while defying the cynicism that was rising before Aang's arrival. The same hope that this new world would challenge. The hardest strains on Aang's spirit are times in which he feels he had failed to live up to the hopes bestowed upon him. And that's what this show is about. A changing world challenging the will and values of its savior. Regardless of these brief but purposeful exceptions, Aang will inevitably restore the balance to the world, while holding on to his values of forgiveness and non-violence. Aang has been taught that all life is sacred, even the life of the tiniest spider fly caught in its own web. His fighting style is defensive to avoid causing unnecessary pain to his opponent. He's even vegetarian. Aang learned these ways of non-violence from the air nomads, inspired by real-life Tibetan culture. However, as he learns at the Southern Air Temple, Aang's people were killed long before his return to the world, in his eyes, due to his initial disappearance, his first endurance test of his ability to forgive. His second test is when he loses his lifelong friend and companion, Appa. This is also the first time we see Aang actively harm a living creature while in full control of his body and the situation. The third test is the world believing he has failed it again by dying at Ba Sing Se. His response upon awakening, to be violent and unforgiving to himself by risking his life with reckless actions. Through these tests, he comes out more in touch with his inner self. The values he has been taught in his beginnings have shined through. When he fails one last time at the Day of Black Sun, this time, he doesn't allow the world to get to him. He is ready for his final test and destiny as the Avatar, the Fire Lord. So here we have a boy, the last remaining member of his non-violent tribe, trapped in the role of a war ender. The Avatar state has the power to fulfill this destiny, but as we learn from the Book 2 premiere, he is haunted by this power and the lack of control he has over it. He does not want to kill anyone, not even the Fire Lord. This disconnect between responsibility and power led to the biggest challenge that this world presented to him. Throughout the 3 books, Aang encounters many incidental situations that he chooses to solve with peacemaking. He prefers to be quick or clever in order to solve problems that may seem easier solved with violence. But as the show approaches its end, Zuko asks a question that addresses the unspoken truth of Aang's responsibility. If violence is never the answer, what is he going to do when he faces his father? This is a question that I'm sure many viewers began to ask themselves once seeing the extent to which Aang would go not to cause harm. But similar to his difficulty earthbending, there seemed to be no different angle, no clever solution, no trickety trick that would defeat the Fire Lord for good. He'd have to face this problem head on. In part 2 of the final episode of the series, Aang seeks out advice from his past lives, all of whom imply that the murder is necessary. What stood out to me were the words of a fellow air nomad avatar, Yang Chen. Selfless duty calls you to sacrifice your own spiritual needs and do whatever it takes to protect the world. But those weren't the words of a pure air nomad. They were the words of a fulfilled avatar, and that's where her priorities lied. She represented the world, not her people. It wasn't Aang's own spiritual needs he was trying to preserve. It was the needs of his entire race, a people for whom he was seeking justice. The series is even named after the people he represents, the Airbenders. The show had always pinned the Fire Nation's violent agenda against the Air Nation's peaceful ways represented through Aang. Ozai and Sozin's twisted interpretation of their element's origin, power, is even in direct opposition to Air's freedom. It's so fitting thematically for an air nomad to be the one to take down the Fire Lord, but their spiritual needs would not call for a violent end. If Aang were to have killed Ozai, that retribution would not have brought honor to his people. Instead, he resisted the ways of this new world and defeated the Fire Lord by means of his own energy overpowering his. The voice of the lion turtle plays over this interaction. To bend another's energy, your own spirit must be unbendable, or you will be corrupted and destroyed. I had always interpreted his words as reference to good versus evil. However, the show constantly expresses through Zuko that people aren't so black and white. In fact, in part 1 of the finale, the gang finds a picture of baby Ozai. It shows that he, like everyone else, was once pure. The sweet and innocent kid may have grown up to be a monster, but he is still a human being. This time around, I reconsidered the quote. To be victorious for the sake of Aang's own people, his spirit must be unbendable. And it was. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on one of my all-time favorite shows. I plan on doing more TV and film analysis in the future, so keep an eye out. Along with that, I post music covers from various genres on various instruments. So if any of that interests you, consider subscribing for more content. Thank you again.